Good morning, Grace Church. Good morning. This is a day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's so good to be worshiping with you all this morning. My name is Arlene Jackson. I'm your pastor here at Grace Church. I want to welcome you all today. So, we're in week 4. I think Chris just said it. We're in week 4 of our Sunday series called Rebuild. So this week I got to thinking. It's always dangerous, but I did. I got to thinking about a story that I once heard that took place in a coal mine about 20 years ago in the Appalachian Mountains in Pennsylvania. 9 miners were trapped for 3 days, 240 feet underground, in a mine shaft no taller than 4 feet. And in an effort to get out, they actually drilled into a wall that was holding back a giant pocket of groundwater, and the mine began filling with 150 million gallons of freezing cold water. So a huge rescue effort began above ground on a nearby farm to dig them out. But it was what was taking place underground that was the real amazement. Let me tell you about it. Right after he was rescued, 31-year-old miner Harry Blaine Hayhew shared his story of these 9 miners. He said, early on we decided we were going to stick together no matter what. We decided to live or die as a group. It was that vision of togetherness that proved to be the difference maker for them. You see, because when the 55-degree water threatened to kill them slowly with hypothermia, the men developed a plan. When one of them got cold, the other 8 would just surround him until he got warm again, and they did that again and again with each guy. Then they tied themselves together so that if one was found, they all would be found. And then they took what little food and light that they had and portioned it between them and shared it. As the water reached their chins, they were narrowly pulled to safety. Here's a picture of these guys. They became known as the 9 for 9. They've been featured in movies, news stories, and even a reunion. Here's a reunion picture of these guys, where the 8 still living miners gathered together. So at that 20-year reunion, a miner by the name of Robert Pugh told the press, "So many good people prayed for us. I never knew we had so many good people in the world." And then he shared this. He said, "There was 9 of us, and God was the 10th man. If you're down and out, don't give up. Don't quit. I never believed in miracles until I ended up being a part of one." What a powerful truth, isn't it? Because many of us right here in this church, including myself, have discovered the same miraculous rescue surrounding our addictions to drugs and alcohol, being snatched from the grave from compulsive behaviors. We sang it earlier. You called my name, then I ran out of this grave. Because of God and the people in this church and recovery, can you say yeah? And here's the deal. Someone here today, you might need rescue from something, and maybe you feel like it's not happening. But rest assured, you can be assured of this. God is with you. Don't give up. Don't lose heart. Even if you don't believe in miracles, you will when you end up being a part of one. Around here, when lives miraculously turn around, we say to one another, "What's the chances of that?" And then we answer, "With God, 100%. That's the chances." So today we're going to continue our message series called Rebuild. It's centered in the Bible book of Nehemiah. And today we're going to meet a group of people who are often ready to quit who had lost heart, and who might not have believed in miracles until together they ended up being a part of one. These were the Jewish people who were conquered by the Persians, who were returning to their destroyed city of Jerusalem after being exiled away from it for 70 years. They had become under the rule of the Persian king, who was a pagan. And day after day, decade after decade, they weren't stuck living in a mine, no, but instead living in the ruins and the rubble of their holy city, Jerusalem. And the people in Jerusalem, they lived in fear. The walls were broken down. They were exposed to enemies and bandits and wild animals and anything else. They were disgraced. Economic development, impossible. Worship, not happening. When meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in Persia, a Jewish man named Nehemiah, who had never actually lived in Jerusalem, gets word that the city of his ancestors is in ruins and needs rescue. Now, even though Nehemiah had no experience whatsoever as a builder, he's just a cupbearer to the king. That's all he is. God stirs him to act. And no matter how unlikely it might seem, the king, the Persian pagan king, agrees to let Nehemiah go to try to rebuild the Jerusalem walls. Nehemiah's faith in God helps him step through the fear of the king and fear surrounding his lack of experience in building anything. And he prays, and he waits, and he plans. And then when he gets the royal okay, he goes. And after a 3-month trek to Jerusalem, he finally stands there and surveys the wreckage with his own eyes. So far, Nehemiah's rescue and rebuild plan had to do with only him and God. And the king. The king said okay. But all of that is about to change. I want to pick up the story where we left off last Sunday in chapter 2 of the book of Nehemiah in verses 16 through 18. And this is Nehemiah after he's surveyed the damage, and he goes and he talks to the people of Jerusalem. The city officials didn't know I had been out there or what I was doing, for I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. I had not yet spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or anyone else in the administration. But now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. And then I told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me and about my conversation with the king. And they replied at once, yes, let's rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. So here's the deal. With Nehemiah's inspection of the walls all done, it's time for others to be involved in this transformation. I mean, Nehemiah can't possibly do this on his own. And here's the deal. When it comes to rebuilding our own selves, wherever we need it, whatever part of our lives that need it, we can't do it alone either. We can't, because rebuilding requires moving from I to we. Can we say this together, please? It's on the screen. Go. Rebuilding requires moving from I to we. Now, this switch can be tough for some of us. Maybe tougher for the guys. Say yeah. All right. I'm married. I know. You know, trusting others can get us hurt. Right? Right? Sometimes it takes longer to get things done with other people than by ourselves. We say things like, if you want something done right, there you go. That's funny. Or we say, if it's going to be, it's up to me, right? We're an individualistic people. But no matter how much the supposedly self-made person says it, the statement, I don't need you, simply isn't true. It's not true. Do you know what the worst punishment that there is in prison? Solitary confinement. Do you know what the worst, single most crushing problem in society is today? It's loneliness. There are dozens of Bible verses that contain the phrase one another because, well, we need one another. God made us that way. God's plan for our lives includes other people. Now, Nehemiah, he knows this. He knows this, right? And I think this message that we have from Nehemiah, just like the miners decided to stick together until they're either rescued or die, I think this message from Nehemiah will teach us that we can be part of a miracle when we stick together. I think this message is going to help us. I think Nehemiah's story can help. Let's look at how Nehemiah goes about rebuilding. First off, like we talked about last Sunday, he's not afraid to name the problem. Sometimes it's hard to name the problem, isn't it? But now that he's named the problem, he invites others into it. It's not just him and God anymore. Look what he says on the highlight on the screen. This is the point at which Nehemiah goes from me to we. And as Nehemiah points out the trouble that the people are experiencing, I want you to note that he is very non-judgmental about it. Even though some of these folks, if you think about it, have been living in Jerusalem for years, and they have not rebuilt the city. Nehemiah doesn't look at them and say, "You bunch of lazy bums. I had to march 1,000 miles away from my job with the king just to tell you to do the obvious. What's wrong with you? You've been living in rubble all this time. You all are a bunch of losers. Get up and get to work." No, he doesn't do that. Instead, Nehemiah understands the despair. These folks have been down for a long time. The rubble of being exiled has destroyed their dignity and their worth. They've seemingly grown accustomed to living in ruins. Their existence can be summed up in a phrase that I hear around a lot that people sometimes say, and I say it too, when asked about how they're doing in their struggle, and it's this word, it's meh, meh. The word meh, it means indifference, lack of enthusiasm, just boredom with the whole thing. This would have been a popular meme back in Jerusalem at the time. See, there would be a person walking down the street, right? They'd run into another person, and they'd say, "So, Aaron, how is your day going?" And Aaron would say, "Meh," right? Don't we sometimes just get used to the rubble in our own life? So much that we don't even notice it anymore. I think about this whenever I invite someone to ride in my car, because I tend to throw all sorts of trash, old water bottles, Pepsi cans, taco wrappers, whatever, onto the floor and onto the seat and wherever, and I don't even notice how obnoxious that's all getting until I invite somebody to get in my car. More seriously, though, this applies to the rubble inside of ourselves. Whatever it is, our addiction, our depression, our illness, our relational problems, our financial ruin, whatever it is, whatever we get used to has the temptation to lull us into settling for a life far less than what God intends for us, because we get used to our own wounds and our own baggage, and we just carry it around. Meh. We don't have enough money to pay rent. Meh. Might as well blow it on food. We can't stay sober. Meh. We might as well just move in with other addicts. It don't matter. Our marriage isn't doing so great. Meh. Why do we have to try to be nice to each other at all? And there probably was a time once when not having money or to pay rent or doing too many drugs or having a poor marriage might have meant something. But now, meh. Not so much. What rebuilding has to take place in your own life? See, before we move on and discover what happens with Nehemiah, think about the rebuild that you might need in your own life. What are you facing? I mean, some of us like me might be facing like an actual rebuild of their house, like after Hurricane Ian, like I'm doing. But here's the real deal. What about your soul? What damage have you grown accustomed to? You're pretty sure no miracle rescue is in sight. Meh. Will you allow God a chance to restore you? And if the answer is yes, will you see that He's going to use others to do it? Just saying, He's gonna. Will you let Him? I mean, we're going to need others to come beside us to help, to encourage, to inspire, to share. And so did the people of Jerusalem. And Nehemiah needed them too. It takes others to help us not settle for less than what God intends for us, to show us the better way. You know, in this world, let's get a little broader. In this world, all over our community, everywhere you look, people are settling for a life of meh. People are lost. Many people are wounded. They're passionless. They're hopeless. They're tired. These are symptoms of a worldwide pandemic. And here's the problem as I see it. This is as Arlene sees it. People haven't experienced the full grace of Jesus rescuing them, and they haven't accepted other people as the vehicle Jesus uses to do it. You know, I know when I first admitted that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol, it was the program of AA that came around me to support me. And I've heard others talk about their support groups for so many other things that helped them rebuild their lives. I know that when my son died, it was the program of Grief Share that helped me rebuild my heart with others who understood exactly what I was going through. We tied our hearts together. We went together. It's on the screen. Let's say it again together. Please go. Rebuilding requires moving from I to we. When you accept Jesus and a community to surround you, you're on your way to a true rescue and rebuild. And so, with a straggly bunch of others behind him, Nehemiah declares, "Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace." Nehemiah calls the people that are living in shame and humiliation a conquered people, objects of scorn, who have lost identity as God's chosen people, created in the image of God, to end their disgrace and begin to rebuild together. Nehemiah gives them a vision of rebuilding both their city and their identity as God's beloved. And he told them the blessing of God and the king were on them in Nehemiah 2:18, when he said, "Then I told them about the gracious hand of God that had been on me and about my conversation with the king." Can I tell you something today? Can I tell you something today? God has a blessing and a vision of rebuilding and restoring and renovating and rescuing in your own circumstance and soul. Right now, your identity and in the city of you. That includes linking arms with others and overcoming and thriving. It's true. And I beg you to stay close to God in the Bible, through prayer, walking through your fears, making the best plans that God can tell you about His will for you, but then to link arms with others to go the distance. Because our faith isn't solitary. It's just not solitary. Jesus is the one who gives us the different communities we need to come around us and help us and love us in all sorts of ways. It's Jesus who is giving us these things. Grief Share helps me with grief. Church helps me with my faith. AA helps me with both faith and my character defects, which I have many. Choose Recovery helps me combine my recovery with Jesus. My pastor's cluster group out there lifts me up with obstacles that we all understand as pastors together. I have a group of women who are my accountability partners in life and recovery. The list actually goes on and on. I used to say I could do it myself, that I didn't need anyone, but not anymore. It ain't true. I need people, and so do you. Amen. Community is where it's at. We can't go the distance without others. Can we say it again? Rebuilding requires moving from I to we. You know, I'm going to invite a friend of mine up. right now to tell his story of moving from I to we. And it's been my pleasure to know him as a friend and walk with him through his restoration with Jesus through community. His name is John. A lot of you know him. Let's welcome him today, John.
Calm down. All right, thanks a lot. Good morning. My name is John, and when Pastor Arlene asked me to do this, my initial thought was this was going to be a monumental task. I was not having it. I was not doing it. I can talk in front of different groups, but not at church. I'm not doing it. So I called the pastor. I called Anthony. I called Kip. I called Rochelle. I called John Metzger, telling them I'm not doing it. But just as Nehemiah prayed, I prayed for God's guidance to accomplish this task. After much prayer and thought, not only did he give me the guidance, he gave me the courage, the strength, and also the wisdom to move forward without reservation. That word reservation is like big in my life. God answered my prayer in the form of Christian brothers around me to encourage and support me. You see, this, like I said, should have been easy for me. I got a lot of experience speaking in front of people. I had a 20-year career in broadcasting. I've emceed events in front of thousands of people. I currently do this in front of my church fellows and my recovery groups. But for some reason, this overwhelmed me. I think it was the fact that it had to be 1,000 words. I stand before you dressed nicely, because that's what I was taught. I have a driver's license with my real address on it. I have a job in recovery. I own my own car. I have a credit card in my pocket that actually belongs to me. It might be hard to believe that me, you see before you, was a street-level drug addict. I had a $1,000 a day crack cocaine addict, crack addiction. I smoked a lot of crack. I didn't have a job, so I preyed on people, not in a physical way, but to get them to buy drugs. I also facilitated dates for prostitutes. In addition, I turned my beautiful house that I lived in for a little over 8 years into a drug house, or as the street calls it, a trap. That beautiful house turned into a war zone. I was a dead man walking. I was emotionally and spiritually dead. For years, I had reservations about whether or not I would stay clean from drugs and all this immoral behavior. However, the community I was a part of, that was the wrong community. See, I first came to recovery in 2008, which is not my sobriety date, through my first higher power, the Lee County Sheriff's Department. See, I'm a 5-time convicted felon with countless misdemeanor charges. I would pass a lie detector test that I would stay clean, but my actions never showed it. I would stay clean for 2 years, then relapse, stay clean for 4.5 years, then relapse, never doing what I was supposed to be doing. See, I'd pick and choose what I did. I was willing to do some things, but not other things. I was not. I had a hole in me that God wanted me to fill with Him, but instead I would fill it with a lot of immoral behavior. I filled it with a lot of women, but my picker was broken. So I used pornography and lots of drugs, lots and lots of drugs. Not today, though. I mentioned earlier that I hung around with the wrong community. You see, when you hang around with the wrong people, you tend to do the wrong thing. So on March 27th of 2021, I surrendered completely. I gave up. I needed help. I was out of options. I needed to find the right community. I worked the 12 steps of recovery as outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The first word in the first step is we. I can't do this without you. I can't stay sober without you. I don't have a life without you. I need to be part of this community. I've been exposed to this recovery thing for many years, but it was not until this spiritual change in me happened that I was able to completely surrender. It's with the help of the community that I have now that my life was completely rebuilt, just like the walls of Jerusalem. God has given me a life that I could never have believed was possible. I make very, very little money. In fact, I make the least I've ever made in my entire life, yet somehow I am the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. I need the community, but I don't need a woman to define me. God defines me. I'm committed to God, this church, and 12-step recovery. I spent 41 years taking, and now I'm dedicated to spending the rest of my life giving back. On this March 27th, God willing, if I live until then, I will have 2 years of continuous sobriety. I am active in this church, both here on Sundays and at Choose Recovery on Mondays, part of my community. I hold a district position in Cocaine Anonymous, also hospitals and institutions position, as well as being an active member of my Cocaine Anonymous home group. I'm not saying all this to say, look at me. I'm saying this to show everyone that the communities that I choose to associate myself with today are the communities that God has allowed me to be part of so that my life could be rebuilt to His good purpose. And I promise yours can be too. I live, eat, and breathe this deal. The mental obsession I used to have was for drugs and sex. Now it's for what I can do to help the next person rebuild their lives. I'm amazed and thankful that God, my pastor, and my church have enough belief in me to stand up here to do this. As I close and look out into the church, knowing that if I can do this, you can do it too. Thank you for letting me share.
And thank you for sharing. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, John. And I think you hit the nail on the head, man. You know, even Jesus needed 12 disciples. The Apostle Paul in the Bible needed Barnabas and Timothy and the others we read about there. God Himself is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit together. Come on now. Alone we suffer and we die. Linked together, we make it out together, just like those 9 miners, just like John. And here's the last piece of all this I want to share with you. Not sure you know this, but isolation is the tool of the devil. Here's what I mean. When I struggled to find sobriety by myself, I couldn't use that time to help anyone else find sobriety. You see what I'm saying? When I stay stuck trying all by myself to fix my own broken relationships, I forget that once my community and I overcome this difficulty, I'll have a platform to help others in Jesus' name overcome the same thing. See, and let me tell you, the devil don't want none of that helping others stuff to get around. The devil wants to keep you sick and hurting and struggling all by yourself, and he'll use shame, and he'll use guilt, and he'll use pride, and he'll use fear as the tools to do it. Being together and honest and working as one, staying tied together through thick and thin, breaks the chain of that lie. And then we're free, see, to be used by God. That's the last piece of all of this. Because imagine a world, just imagine, where all people, all, live with the assurance of their identity in God, that they're people of sacred worth, knowing Jesus and others are there to overcome anything in their way and empower them to help others to do the same. Just imagine. That would be amazing. It would be, well, come to think of it, it might be like the kingdom of heaven on earth, right? Just as Jesus said, the kingdom of God. That's what's up. That's what's at stake. It was what was at stake for Nehemiah, whose team rebuilt their city. It was at stake for those miners in that dark hole who now inspires so many people with their story. It was at stake for John, who now serves God literally wherever he's asked, even to do this thing that he didn't want to do. It was at stake for me, and it's at stake for you. Together, it can happen. So once again, it's on the screen. Let's say it together. Go. Rebuilding requires moving from I to we. It requires that movement so that others can have that movement too. Friends, God is on the move. We sang about it right now in this church, in this community, in every recovery meeting here, in the grocery store, in the kids department at Choose Recovery, in the parking lot where we're going to park cars for the Edison Parade in a couple of weeks, at Franklin Park Elementary School, our mission partner in Ghana, where we're going to hear Mike Mosley next week, on Wednesday nights, Connect and Grow, at Kairos outside prison ministry, where many of our people are serving right now outside these doors, helping people overcome the problems that they have from people they love being incarcerated. At Wednesday night, Connect and Grow, all the traditional recovery meetings that are around here, AA, CA, NA, GA, all the A's. God is moving in our community. He needs you to be holy and whole to help. People need the restoration that Jesus gives, shared with them by people who had it shared with them. God needs you right in the middle of all this togetherness so that you can do it. And don't believe the critics. Don't believe the critics who say, whatever rebuilding you need can't be done. Don't believe it. Or you can't help others because you're too broken, or there's nothing you can do anyway, so there's nothing, so don't bother. Meh. Don't believe it. Nehemiah had critics too. We're going to hear about that in the next couple of weeks. But for now, pay them no mind. Far too many years now, I've been hearing the reports of doomsayers, right, who say people don't care about God anymore. Young people aren't interested in God. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. Addicts don't even want help, so don't bother. Don't believe it. Is our world changing? Of course. Yes. Rapidly. Do each of us need to adjust? Yeah. But is Jesus no longer relevant? Not even hardly. Not even close. In fact, Jesus is needed more than ever. And he needs you healthy, and he needs you whole, linked arm in arm with others who help you to rebuild your life so that you can spread the message to others that Jesus can do this for them too. Say amen. Here's how the people of Jerusalem responded to Nehemiah's offer of rebuilding. As he gives the vision for rebuilding the walls and restoring souls, the people join in being part of the solution. And this is what they say. Say it with me. It's the part in red. Go. They replied at once, yes, let's rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. Are you ready to begin? Are you ready to begin the good work? I mentioned a lot of things earlier on. Choose Recovery has a men's group that can't be beat. Everybody in it, say amen. Okay, the grocery store serves God together, but they do life together too. It's not just a grocery store tied together in their faith. Wednesday night is the perfect place to begin your rebuild with others. Connect and grow. Let's stick together because God is on the move. And you may, even though you didn't expect it, be part of a miracle. And what's the chances of it? With God, 100%. You can count on it. Let's stand. We're going to share in communion together. It's a thing we do as a community. It's going to take a little bit. We're going to go over a little bit. Don't be running out the door. Be here. Be here to share in community. Communion is when Jesus and his community of 12 disciples got together, and he needed them. He needed them because he was about to go to the cross, and he needed them to surround him and help him get through this. And he gathered with them together to share a Last Supper before he went, as the servers come forward. He gathered with them and he said, I'm not going to be with you much longer, but when you share this meal, remember me, think of me, be strengthened by me, and go together to change the world. That's what he wants us to do. If you think you don't deserve this meal, you're wrong. You come up and you get that togetherness with Jesus. And you can stop and pray at the altar if you want as well. What Jesus said is he took some bread and he blessed it and he gave it to his disciples and he thanked God for it and he broke it and he said, "This is my body about to be broken for you." And then he took the juice. And as he was going to serve it to his friends, he first blessed it, gave thanks to God for it, and he said, represents my blood about to be shed for you. As often as you eat and drink this, please remember me. So come forward together as the family of God, and we're going to pray a prayer, but we're going to do it in song, and I think you're going to recognize it. So as you feel led, come, be strengthened by the togetherness with God and with one another in this holy meal.